From the mixed middle arts community, this is the woke centrist, and this is mixed middle arts chats. All right, rocking solo for a while. Um, Drew has sciatica, which means he has pain in his butt cheek, so he will not be able to participate in the festivities today due to that pain. As usual, Andrew is late, like always, and not sure why Isaiah bailed. Maybe he's busy with bachelor related things. Who knows? But let me make sure this thing is getting broadcast first and foremost. Because we had some technical difficulties, and I have no idea if this is even being broadcast. But I think it is, because it's, I think it's, yeah, there we go. I heard myself. All right. Yeah, it definitely works. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, so what we were going to talk about today was going to be 80s anime. 80s anime does have a special place in my childhood. You know, the early 80s, Japan was in a big economic boom. You know, they're producing lots of animation, of course, video games, electronics. You know, a lot of the big names you hear today that are also shrinking, names like Sony. Um, Everybody had to have a Sony Walkman. It was the thing to have in the 80s. This big, bulky tape player that ran on batteries. And then later they had the Discman, which was a mobile CD player. I believe I had both. I had a Walkman and a Discman, and they weren't really that cheap. I think a Discman was like $40 or something like that. Um, it came in handy for sure. When I bought my first car, I think I just had a tape deck, and I had a Discman hooked up to this adapter that you put into the front of the tape deck that allows you to play CDs and things like that. But yeah, Japan had a lot going on for it in the 80s. And in the early 80s, I was also a child. So, what kind of influence did Japan have on animation media in general? It was very subtle. A lot of people didn't really know how big its influences were because they were hidden pretty well. If you take a look at the early anime shows like Speed Racer, Astro Boy, you know, these are pre 80s, or even G Force. I know it has another name, Gatchaman. It was pretty obvious that shows like that were Japanese, at least created in Japan. But what happened later is a lot of our American animated shows were actually animated in Japan, and shows we didn't even know did not originate in America at all, like things like Transformers. You know, those definitely were not, they were American import or Japanese imports. You know, Transformers, there was like a crappy version like called the GoBots in the 80s. Um, GoBot sucked. I had some GoBot toys, but the show was just not on par. Not on par at all with Transformers. There was also G.I. Joe. Interesting enough, G.I. Joe I think it was animated in Japan. like a lot of the cartoons of the 90s and 80s were actually animated in Japan, and we're talking about the action cartoons. Um, so there are a ton of different shows that were pretty awesome back in the day. So if we take a look at some of the good stuff, I know there's Robotech. Now, I think Robotech actually came out in the 70s. Oh, look, it's my main man.
What's up?
How'd you do with your homework assignments?
Oh, I watched four of those
Okay,
animated. I
which
watched
one?
um I watched Vampire Hunter D, Area, Dominion Tank Police, and Lily Cat. Just the first four in that list that you gave me.
Oh, okay. I forgot to tell you that Area and Tank Police, they're called OVAs. They're basically two-part movies.
Okay. Yeah, they were all on YouTube, and the Dominion Tank Police one was in 4 episodes.
Yeah, I think it was two episodes of like 37 minutes or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, when they originally aired on TV, they aired as two movies.
Okay.
Same thing with Area. They put three episodes together, and
Okay.
they called Area Part One and Area Part Two.
Okay. Area is really long. That one's like 2.5 hours.
Yeah, Area is six episodes total, and
Okay.
I think all the episodes are like 30 minutes each, or around there, maybe
Okay.
27, 25 minutes. So that was definitely the longest one. But out of the assignments, what was your favorite?
I think Vampire Hunter D was definitely my favorite.
Was that the first one you watched?
Yeah, yeah. I I just like I don't know, I like it. I love vampires, and D, like you said, is he's a stoic badass. And then they had the like typical like hot chick slaying demons and stuff like that that often happens in anime, so that's cool too.
Yeah, his stoicness, I think, was most on display when he's just wrapped up with the snake chicks.
Yeah,
It's just kind of like whatever.
yeah.
He's just sitting there, like waiting stoically, not screaming out, no reaction whatsoever. And you can
Yeah,
tell he's there for a while, and then he just gets pissed off and,
yeah,
draws on his vampiric powers.
yeah. That's cool too, how he's sort of like a human vampire hybrid, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, they call him a damn peer, a damn fear.
Yeah,
Um, I think one of the things, because I know it's based off of, I don't know if they're books or graphic novels, could be one or both, but a lot, whenever you have a vampire mixture of human and vampire, like you always tend to see that they have all the strengths of a vampire, but none of the weaknesses, which is the case in that respect. But I guess he did have that one weakness with the incense,
oh yeah,
and he gets stabbed in the chest, and he has like a pretty crazy, a violent death there,
yeah,
where he kind of like does. Well, he's like laying on the ground, and then he raises himself up like 45 degrees, and like is just screaming like hell, and then his buddy brings him back to life. The hand that rocks the cradle. But yeah, that one. I think it's the first time I saw the trope, and this is a trope that happens in a lot of Japanese anime, where they slice something and then a second later it splits apart. There was this one monster guy that he just kind of slices in half, and then like a split second later, the thing starts coming apart and you can see its insides.
I just got you just got like cut out for about 30 seconds there for me. Sorry.
Oh, well, I was explaining that this in Vampire Hunter D was one of the first times I saw the anime trope of something getting sliced in half and then half a second later it splits apart. Like
Right.
that's something that actually happens a lot later on.
Yeah.
But that was like the first time I ever saw it, and in that respect, it's really gruesome because you cut a monster in half and you can see like its brain and stuff. But most of the time, that trope they cut inanimate objects like trees and bamboo stalks, but typically it's not like a body where they have some gross stuff coming out. And
Yeah.
Vampire Hunter D is actually really graphic.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah, like
You
the like
go ahead.
violent like anime and oh sorry.
No, go ahead.
Like anime in general, or at least a lot of animes being violent even though they're animated is why I got into them when I was a teenager because I'm like, oh, they're like cartoons, but they're like violent and awesome.
That's why you weren't allowed to watch them when you were a kid.
Well, there's some anime that's not violent, like Pokemon,
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
but
And like well, I guess like particular is especially Dragon Ball, but like Dragon Ball Z too. There is violence, but there isn't as much like blood and it isn't as gruesome and stuff like that.
no, like I would say the violence level of Vampire Hunter D is definitely rated R.
Yeah,
Dragon Ball Z is like PG-13 maybe because I know there's a couple dismemberments, but they're not really graphic. They're just like cartoonish, very cartoonish looking. Like I know a couple people get their limbs chopped off, but it just looks like it doesn't even look like they have any like internal muscles or anything. It just looks like skin where they where they just got chopped their hand chopped off. Dragon Ball is just kind of cartoonish like that, but um, yeah, Vampire Hunter D is definitely rated R. I think
yeah,
like the violence is because it's some of it's so like super gross.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Like I think one of the most disturbing ones is when the glam rock punk rocker guy like faces off against Dracula because oh no, that's not his name. Lee, I think is his name, Count Lee, because he failed him and he said he'd have to wait 50 years to ask to be a vampire. And he's like, dude, I'm going to be dead by then.
Yeah,
So, so he saves like the little boy and then he faces off and all he does is get his head smashed in on every single piece of um, granite in the place. And then
yeah,
lastly, his head gets exploded.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah, and Dracula is cool in that too. He's like different from the way he's often portrayed. Like sometimes he's portrayed in kind of a cheesy way, but I like especially where he's talking in one part about how it kind of sucks to live for like 10,000 years, and every 100 years or so I want a new woman and then I get bored with her, so then like 100 years later I'll get a new one. I'm like, wow, that makes sense if you're 10,000 years old.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then I guess in that universe, like the older a vampire you are, the more powerful. And that's kind of a common theme in vampire shows. Like the older they are, the more powerful they are. But in this case, he's like 10,000 years old. And the setting is super interesting too for the Vampire Hunter D world. So it's like a post-apocalyptic, like 1800s with
Yeah,
like cyber horses. It's like such a weird mashup of themes
yeah,
that that keeps you like, huh, like when does this take place? There's like a guy wearing one of those frilly scarves, and
yeah,
then people driving mechanical cyborg horses, and then people shooting laser guns. So you're kind of confused about what type of timeline this thing takes place at.
yeah, yeah. I like that. Yeah, that seems like sort of that sort of like kind of mishmash of themes. It seems sort of common, at least in those animes that I watch too, or at least the sort of post-apocalyptic aspect, because that seems like it seems like that's an area and Dominion Tank Police as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's Yeah, that's definitely an area. 'Cause I think area is more like a space travel
Yeah,
type of like a alternate universe.
yeah, it's more like
And,
science fiction.
yeah, and then Tank Police is like cyberpunky, I guess,
Yeah,
without getting heavy into like cyberpunk elements.
yeah,
Like the main bad guy is basically a cyberpunk creation. He has a brain that's made out of like microchips or something, and he's trying to figure out like why he was created, what's going on with him. But yeah, I like how the thing about anime in those ages is that they were very, I guess they would just kind of take a lot of chances with the material, like much more so than you would see in your normal, 80s American fare. They would just go
yeah,
way out there on certain subjects, and they're like, wow, that's strange. Like,
yeah,
especially, I think there's like, they kind of cover, like, if you think about it, like in Vampire Hunter D, like the main female, she's not really just like a damsel in distress. Like, she can
oh yeah,
actually kick her ass herself,
yeah,
because that's kind of what she's doing in the beginning. But the Count Lee is just way too strong for
yeah,
her,
yeah,
and her
yeah.
her dad was like a werewolf hunter, and she kind of has those skills, but like hunting vampires is a whole nother skill in itself.
Yeah. Yeah, and she's definitely not the typical helpless woman at all, for sure. And yeah, remember I was saying to you too that she looks a lot like Sailor Moon, or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe Sailor Moon looks like her.
I think Vampire Hunter D came out first.
Okay.
Because that came out in '85. I don't know.
I'm not
And
sure when Sailor Moon started.
in the '80s, but I'm not sure, and I'm not sure which came into print first.
Okay.
So to be honest, I can't really say. Maybe all I know is yeah, Sailor Moon is old, is newer. It came out in the '90s, so Sailor Moon's after Vampire Hunter D.
Yeah, I remember it being Sailor Moon being on TV when I was a kid.
Yeah, it was a girl show, and I still watched it.
Yeah, I
Because
watched it
they always
sometimes.
fought. They always like fought monsters and stuff, and like there was combat in it.
Yeah.
It was just a bunch of girls were fighting things instead of a superhero group of dudes. It's not really much different, except you have to contend with like more romancy crap than you would like.
Yeah.
If it was a guy show, they would not focus at all on romance. If we're talking about something like He-Man or G.I. Joe or something like that,
Yeah.
Of course, not Transformers. Like, what the hell is a Transformer gonna do? It's not gonna confess its love to another robot. So I think that's probably the only little difference, but it's mostly um, also in 80's anime. There's a very big emphasis, and I didn't have you watch any of these, but many shows, movies, whatnot usually have a high schooler as a protagonist
Oh,
more
okay.
than anything else that I can think of. Like, usually young teenagers are kicking ass and saving the world in in a lot of these things.
How old is Iria?
15.
Oh, okay. I thought she was like a teenager or something like that.
Yeah, there's all this very emphasis of in Japanese culture that young adults can kick ass like normal adults,
Yeah.
especially in the media. I don't know if that's the case in real life, but yeah, Vampire Hunter D. I think out of the list, that was the oldest one I sent you, and the other ones are mostly early '90s as well. Um, and moving on, what do you think of Iria? It was the longest one. I didn't
I,
realize it was that long.
yeah. I would say that that was probably my second favorite one. Um, I just liked how I liked all the weird fucked up monsters and the especially the main monster and how weird and fucked up it was and the all the traveling around and science fiction material and technology and stuff like that.
Yeah, the really interesting thing about this one is that the technology was not what you would expect in a sci-fi movie.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
very look of the technology, like it looks not high tech. It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, for
Like
sure.
they're flying around in these vehicles that look like they were made in like the '70s. They look like Star Wars vehicle, like
Yeah.
the speeders and stuff. And
Yeah.
then you have the guy flying around on the Depodon, which is just this umbrella with a chair attached to it.
Yeah. Yeah. They
So
don't they weren't that imaginative for predicting what space travel and what those those things for flying around or the weapons technology would be
yeah,
like.
they're using like regular guns with like
Yeah.
a couple like different things thrown in there. I think a lot of the technology in that movie revolved around like that shield thing that they kind of that was like the most
Oh,
advanced.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
it was.
I really liked in the story how at the end it turned out that Iria had to basically fight her brother that had been taken over by the virus of the main demon. I forget what it was called. I think it started with a K, but she
Zerum.
yeah, Zerum, but he couldn't or she couldn't shoot her brother when he like brought himself out of the infestation of the demon, and then she just had to defeat him the hard way basically. And she kind of had to like allow herself to get overtaken by the demon too. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, one of the weird things about that particular anime is that it's a prequel to a live action show, like
Oh,
movie.
really? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So a live action movie called Zerum, it's just called Zerum. It has the same characters of Iria. She fights Zerum. She has Bob, and I think she actually travels to modern day Earth to fight Zerum. So it's actually I guess the sequel to that anime, but it came out first. So I think there's actually two movies, and then that prequel came out.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting just because in the beginning you get a kind of sense that they're like bounty hunters basically. They get different jobs, and she's a bounty hunter's trainee, and we're led to think like that her brother's just like this big badass bounty hunter that gets all the best jobs. And and the plot is a little confusing in the beginning because it when you don't really know what's going on in the beginning, it seems a little chaotic. You know that they're supposed to go on some type of mission, and then they're being stopped from going on the mission. And then they arrive there, and they're like, "What the fuck is going on here?" It's like nothing is going according to plan at all. And then
Yeah,
after the whole debacle happens, like it's pretty much scrubbed from the news. It's as if the incident never happened.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is weird.
So you're like, and they don't kind of clearly explain in the beginning, like what their mission is. They're just like, oh, we have to go to the Karma.
Yeah,
But I did see this as a younger kid, and I will admit that the voice acting isn't the best.
yeah.
There is some corny voice acting. I'm not gonna deny that.
I don't know.
But
It seems like to me at least, it seems like the dialogue in general in 80s anime is like kind of fucking cheesy.
it is. But I think like dialogue wise, Vampire Hunter D was pretty good.
Yeah, I think
Like
so.
it wasn't really cheesed up. Some of this was. It was just like the acting itself, I think, wasn't that good.
Yeah,
But that's fine. I still enjoyed the aesthetics of what they were trying to do, which is very different from what you would see in most sci-fi. And it
yeah,
kind of reminds me of a little bit of Star Wars because they are kind of using these speeders. Um, but yeah, they're fighting a, a biological alien that clones itself and assimilates, and they don't know. They actually don't know all of its abilities, so
yeah,
small face connected to. But yeah, it's a lot of it is about her coming to terms with her brother's death. But we learned that they're not really siblings, but it's coming to terms with the death of her, I guess, her mentor, and then kind of actually making a new apprentice in the process, if you think about it.
yeah, that's true. Yeah,
Because she recruits Kay in the final battle against Zerum.
yeah,
And one of the things I liked about too is they had like all these weird, quirky names for all of their little weapons and devices. Like like I guess when Fujikuro's vehicle is like my Depadon. It's
yeah.
like all these weird names. I forgot what the name of the. Oh yeah, that laser gun. It's called a Baropadin.
Oh, okay.
The one that shoots out. It has like three barrels, and then those big ass laser guns that the military comes. I forgot. Those are Maropadin. I don't know. They all have weird names that they just kind of made up, and they all sound strange.
Yeah.
I think the name of the vehicle is called a creeper.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So one of the other themes that they kind of go through is like poverty, which is an interesting theme that they touch on.
Yeah.
Um, in I think it was the first part, right after the destruction of the Karma area lands on the planet, and it looks like a resort town, but part of it is just like filled with like extreme poverty.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's interesting.
I don't think I'll go to the library. What?
Sorry.
But I guess one of the themes is like, what do you do with those people? And
Yeah.
Yuria has a big heart, and she tries to save them. And then
Yeah.
there's like this administrative government body that's like, fuck these people, let Zero
Yeah.
kill them all. They're like,
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, man.
Yeah, that that was that was surprising. I'm like,
Like,
no, we're just gonna let them all die. I'm like, yeah, okay.
I was like, wow. And then she does probably the right thing, and she leads Zerum back to them, and they all get fucked up by Zerum.
Yeah.
And then she puts them in a transporter. But the second half, yeah, second half is all about coming to grips with her brother being basically incorporated into Zerum, um, syncing up with the doctor, and Zerum basically cloning himself and creating an army and trying
Yeah.
to calm down. Like it's kind of has that Howard the Duck kind of ending where they're trying to lead the aliens to the beacon, and they gotta stop them from doing that. But it's an interesting and cool movie.
Yeah. And I like that whole
Free on
thing.
YouTube.
I like that. Yeah, exactly. I like that whole
Actually, it's
thing where
free on
the
Amazon Prime. I did watch it on YouTube, but some of it was like muted. I was like, what the hell's going on here?
Oh, really?
Yeah, I watched.
I watched the whole thing on YouTube and it worked fine.
Okay, I watched it on Prime. It's free for Prime
Oh,
members.
okay. And yeah, I like that whole thing with the alien too, where like it's sort of taking over things like a virus, like especially at the end when it starts just taking over an area and like you said, replicating itself and stuff like that. That was really cool.
Yeah, I think basically there's a faction that wanted to keep him as a biological weapon, which has a lot of parallels with the aliens. There's always the shady government or the shady corporate guy from Wayland Yutani who wants to save some alien samples so that they can weaponize them. And
Yeah.
there is that aspect in this movie as well with the Tadon Corporation. I think that's what
Yeah.
they're called in this. But
Actually, with in terms of Alien, also, especially when I was watching Lily Cat, that made me think a lot of Alien, especially the first Alien movie where they're like isolated on a ship and an alien life form takes over the ship.
yes, very much so. And we'll talk about that one as well.
Yeah,
Before we talk about Lily Cat, let's jump into Tank Police. Now, Tank Police is goofy.
yeah, that's the
um,
cheesiest one.
I didn't mind the cheesiness because it had decent action scenes, but um, I wouldn't call it cheesy. It's just really goofy and campy, and that's why I like Areas wasn't supposed to be goofy or campy, but some of the dialogue, because it was poorly acted, seemed that way. Um, Tank Police is actually intentionally supposed to be goofy and campy, and
Oh, so that's the difference between cheesy and goofy and campy. Cheesy is unintentionally goofy and campy.
yes,
Okay.
Tank Police is supposed to be that way. It's not like you're supposed to laugh at it.
Okay, I didn't know
It's
that.
not, yeah, it's not super serious. Um, and the characters are extremely, I guess, stereotypical and weird. Like,
There's the church guy who speaks like he's came out of the King James Bible.
Yeah. And that guy who's the leader of the cops too. He's such a stereotype too.
Yeah, he's over the top.
Yeah.
Um, but there are a lot of stereotypical characters in it, but it's definitely supposed to be somewhat campy. Like, here's what I'll note: the creator of Tank Police is the same person who created Ghost in the Shell.
Oh, that's cool. Ghost in the Shell's way better.
Well, Ghost in the Shell, it depends. Like the source material, if we're talking just about the comic books, they're very close to what the Tank Police is. They're campy. There's a lot of jokiness in it.
Oh, okay.
Um, but in the movies, they took out all the jokiness and made it like pretty serious.
Oh, okay.
Same,
Oh, I
yeah,
didn't
same
realize
thing.
that.
Yeah, same thing with the show. But um, the guy who created those, he just does all cyberpunk stuff mostly.
Oh,
It's all
okay.
cyberpunk. And I don't know, they might take place all in the same universe, but I don't know, probably not. Because I know one of the his series is post-apocalyptic. But I think Tank Police was one of the other early anime things that I saw. I remember it coming on. It came on HBO, because there's like nudity and
Oh.
stuff in it.
Oh, yeah.
Lots of cursing but it's not bloody or gory like Vampire Hunter D is.
Yeah.
It's just there's just a lot of sexual jokes in
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah, that woman who's the cop, she's like there are a lot of sexual jokes at her expense.
Yeah, and then just the weird stuff that happens. Like for instance, I guess the first half is all about the piss, right?
Yeah.
The so there's this group of humans that are not contaminated by this bacterial cloud that plagues. I don't know if it's just from the city or if it's like the whole earth that's plagued by this thing. But they're trying to study these people who have no resistance to this thing. And the people who don't have no resistance, they consider those people healthy because um, they're not infected. Um, so I guess in the first part, there's this. I guess they're criminals, thieves. They're hired by some type of syndicate. So it's Oahu. Well, I know it's more than three people, but they typically showcase three people, which is Oahu, the weird-looking guy with the reverse Hitler mustache. Um,
Reverse Hitler mustache, that's true.
well, he has no mustache in the middle. It's just like on the ends.
Yeah.
He has these weird goggles. He's a little overweight, intentionally ugly kind of looking dude. And then you have these two hot like cat girls.
Yeah.
Don't even know what they are. They there's not really explained, but from what we know, they're not human. They're
Yeah.
often referred to as not being human.
Still hot though.
Yeah, that's funny because there's this part where they get cornered by the police and they strip tease their way out of it.
Yeah, that was funny.
They're like,
And
"Goodbye,
then they just
boys," and then they start shooting and shooting
yeah.
missiles out.
Yeah.
There's actually a really big difference between this version and the American version. Um, the soundtrack is completely different for the Japanese version. There's actually
Okay.
two different soundtracks. I don't like the Japanese soundtrack that much.
Oh, okay.
Um,
I think I watched the English version. Yeah.
yeah, if but you can tell if you're watching the English version if the intro song is just Tank Police. Dun, 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 dun. That's the
Yeah,
English intro.
that's the one. That's a really cheesy
That's
80s
like the
theme
head
song too.
bob. It's not even 80's either. It's like something you would hear, at the Roxbury. It's something to bob your head to,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
So
That's
like
true.
the American soundtrack is like early 90's dance music,
Yeah.
and the Japanese soundtrack is like, I don't know, like 80's J-pop. But
What's J-pop?
it's like Japanese pop music.
Oh, okay.
A lot of synthesizers and singing. Because
Oh, okay. Oh, that's why I confused it for 80s because it's the synthesizers.
well, dance music is just like really repetitive, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what it is. Um, but you thought it was cheesy, huh?
Yeah.
So what half did you like better, the first half or the second half?
Mm, maybe the second half because it had like it had a bit of a more interesting plot and more violence, I would say.
Hmm. I actually like the first half better, but I see what you
Oh,
mean.
okay.
Like the plot in the second half is actually a cyberpunk plot.
Yeah. Yeah.
The first half doesn't really have a cyberpunk plot. There's a plot there, but it's not fleshed out until the second half.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just like the first because it's like um, there's that really cool tank battle in the first half where
Yeah, that is really cool.
they're going up against like it's like the small pipsqueak tank against like two ancient battle tanks, and they're digging it out.
Yeah. That little tank that the cops have is interesting too, and how it can do things like jump over shots when they get fired and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing too, why I also like the first half is because it's funnier. Um, the first half they had the ultimate deterrent. Do you remember that? Because remember when they get the tanks, there's the crime boss who's like, "Oh, they could they complain about their tanks being old and outdated," and then the crime boss is like, "Oh, erect the cocky. This is the ultimate deterrent." They find like these flat things on the back, and they're like, "What's this?" And they ended up being like giant inflatable penises, like dick mines. You don't remember that?
Right. Yeah, that was funny.
And then the little tank is fast, so it doesn't get messed up by the dick mines. Like
Yeah.
I just like the first half because it's goofy. It's funny.
If you're fast,
It's
you can
hilarious.
escape the dick mines.
Yeah, it's hilarious. It's goofy.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's why I like the first half. It's just like funny, goofy, lots of very snarky and campy stuff going on.
Yeah.
Um, you will notice the movie is always at night. Like there's no part of this where I think there's one shot of it during the daytime. One, I think.
Oh, yeah.
One shot. And I think that's at the end where they're complaining about like all of the damages that they did. and they blow. They start. Leona starts firing shots, and then the papers go flying out the window. And I think that shot's a daytime shot, if I'm not mistaken, or an afternoon shot.
I don't
Might be
know.
wrong
Yeah,
on that.
I didn't notice that, but now that you mention it, yeah, that's true.
But that's like the only daytime shot in the whole thing. All right, and then we had Lily Cat. How'd you like that one?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. It was like I was saying, it's sort of different from a few of the other ones because there's that there's basically that the plot is that there are these people on this ship and then they get trapped on the ship in space with something that they don't know what it is, so they have to figure out eventually that it's an alien slash virus trying to take over that ship, and it's a weird, fucked up, trippy alien, which is interesting. And I like it because it's sort of like a mystery. They have to figure out what's going wrong, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me a little bit of The Thing, just about how gory and weird it is, and how it
Yeah,
like tears things apart and transforms them.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think out of all of those, I think it was probably the shortest one. I think it's probably maybe as long as Vampire Hunter D.
Yeah, I just watched that one last night, and I think it was an hour and 7 minutes. So yeah, it's even slightly shorter than Vampire Hunter D.
Yeah, so that one, I saw it when it first came out not first came out, but when it came out on American TV, they aired it. Like all these things I watched when they were aired on television
Oh, okay.
a long ass time ago. But
Yeah.
yeah, Lily Cat is very, very, very similar to Alien. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I
like
said,
there's
I
this
was
thing
noticing
that
that.
goes into their air vents and they're woken up, weird shit's starting to happen in the computer system.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's
they're
like
like, where
Alien
is
with
this thing?
without going on to a planet to get the alien, and without the AI going bad and trying to kill everyone.
Yeah, so it's a very, very simple sci-fi horror plot. Not too crazy. I guess you have your cast of characters.
Yeah,
I think. Well, what role does the cat play in it?
yeah.
Why is it called?
That's what I was just thinking. That is another similarity with Alien in a way, because the cat turns out to be an AI, right?
That's spying on him.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like nobody assumes a cat is like gonna be listening.
yeah,
So if there's just a cat in the room, you're gonna say whatever the hell you want, right? But yeah, I had that similar element where the cat is spying on people and relaying information. So, were there any other movies or series that you've seen that you want to talk about?
Um, well, the only the other 80's type of anime that I've been watching lately that told you about is I started watching Robotech, and that one's interesting.
Well, how far along did you get into that? Because that one's pretty long.
I only just barely started it. Like I watched the first couple episodes. I think I was telling you, I remember watching that one on TV when I was a kid, and so I figured out that it must have been when there was a rebroadcast on. I remember seeing when I looked this up on Wikipedia at the end of each episode that it was from Funimation. So
Mhm.
I figured that must have been the rebroadcast in 1998, because that's probably around the time when I would have been watching them. So, like I was saying to you, I didn't even know that they had originally been released in 1985. And Like I remember when I was a kid too, just thinking it was so cool that there were these planes that could turn into robots and fight aliens and stuff like that.
Yeah, one of the first transforming mecha shows. And when I say transforming mecha, there's a lot of giant robot
Yeah.
anime,
Yeah,
but
that's one thing we were talking about too. Like I was asking you what the exact difference is between Robotech, Evangelion, Mech Assault, and Gundam. And there are like a bunch of differences, I guess, right?
yeah, I would just say like Robotech, because if we're talking about these things, I'd probably talk about the type of plots they are. And Robotech is mainly a military drama um, about two species fighting over resources and not knowing like about each other's cultures and discovering. It's basically about them discovering each other's culture instead of being fearful of each other.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a lot of Robotech is about conquering tribalism and things like that. Because
Oh, cool.
Robotech isn't even a real series. It was concocted. So I'll tell you the story of Robotech and how it was created. So Robotech, there's actually three series. It's Macross, Southern Cross, and Mospiata. These are actually three different separate shows that have nothing to do with each other in Japan.
Hmm.
But when they brought these over to America, they concocted a story, an overarching story.
Oh,
So,
okay. So how
yes.
were what were the distinct characteristics of the three different ones before?
Well, all three shows have transforming mecha, like a mecha that transforms to a vehicle to a giant robot of some sort. All three involve fighting aliens. So they're all connected. Robotech, they created an overall story to connect these three different animes. But in actuality, there are three different stories that are not related at all.
So why do you think they did that, and where do you see where in the show do they combine these different elements?
Well, some of them are just combined through character names. So, like in the sequel series, some characters are offspring of other characters. So simply by name recognition, it's like, oh, that's blank and blank's daughter or whatever. So you have that connection from series to series. Um, Another connection is they definitely try to weave motivations of all of the different adversaries as the same motivations, which were had occurred before these alien species arrived at Earth. So all of these things are aliens arriving at Earth,
Okay.
and they all knew each other or had fought each other in some way before they arrived on Earth. So the alien species all knew each other, but the humans didn't know any of these species that came and tried to fight them. Um, but yeah, it's really complicated in how they weave these three stories together. But yeah, it's one of the interesting things about Robotech because there's no real such thing as Robotech in Japan. It was just a made up name for these three series that are Macross. And the funny thing is, it's like Macross has a bunch of sequels, but that's not part of Robotech because Robotech is a construction of different series together under one storyline.
You got cut out for me for about 10 seconds again there. Sorry.
Oh, I was just saying that Robotech is very unique in that it's a construction of three different unrelated series.
Okay. So why do you think they did that?
I don't know exactly. I think what happened was when they bought the rights to these shows to bring them over to the US, they wanted to make a way that was more palatable for consumption. I also think that when they brought them over to the US, it's more attractive. Like, say you're trying to sell your show to a network, your show becomes more attractive when there's more episodes to offer for your series. So when they're combining all these different series together, it's like, oh, there's like three or I think 4 seasons. There's a lot of episodes.
Yeah, I think they're like 30, 39 episodes or something like that.
Yeah, I think Robotech is a season and a half.
Yeah.
Macross, at least, the first one.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So yeah, there's probably marketing reasons, like, oh, look at all these toys we can sell, because they did sell the different toys from all these three different series when they came out. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on.
You think in terms of like production companies being more attracted to shows that have more episodes, do you think that that's sort of changed today with like Netflix and that sort of culture around creative content where there are all these like mini series and shows happening all the time where a lot of the season and it seems like a lot of the with a lot of seasons of most shows now, it seems like there are only maybe 13 episodes per season or something like that.
Yeah, that's definitely changed a bit. Like if we're going to talk about old school TV, like you get one new episode a week, and the season is half a year.
Yeah,
But we're
and they're
talking
like
about
25 episodes or something like that.
yeah, with like a 2 week break.
Yeah.
It's so right now with the advent of Netflix, they just release everything right up front. I guess this is good creatively because you can craft your story however you want it. It doesn't have to perfectly align with the 24 episode format. Like you can pace it differently. There's a lot more you can do in that respect.
Yeah.
So there's definitely those different creative um, tools that they have now because they can um, choose how many episodes that they want to make. But I think that also makes it harder to make longer shows too, because if you think about it, it's hard to order a 24 episode season now on Netflix. I think there are some things that have that, but very few. And
Yeah,
that reminds me
exactly.
of like how like the show 24 like needed those 24 episode seasons.
Yeah. Yeah. And then if you go to like the complete opposite end of the spectrum, there's there's Sherlock that's on Netflix, but I think not originally a Netflix show, but they have like 3 hour-and-a-half long episodes per season, which which is like each one of them is kind of a movie in a way, but there's really not very many episodes.
So like basically three movies a season.
Yeah, that newer Sherlock show with Benedict Cumberbatch and I forget the actor's name right now, but that guy who plays Bilbo Baggins in the newer Hobbit movies.
Oh, I think I know who you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't even seen the show, but I probably should check that out. Hmm.
It's my favorite. It's my favorite representation of the character of Sherlock ever. I love the original stories, and I like some of the movies, but
Hmm.
I think, like, in my opinion, the way that the character that both characters of Sherlock and Watson are presented, and the relationship between them, is so much more well developed in the show than the characters are in the stories, in the original stories. And in the stories, there is some character development, and there's interaction between characters, and you get a little bit into the mind of Sherlock and stuff like that, but they really fully flesh that out in the show. And also in the show, some of the stuff, with some of the episodes that they clearly base on on specific Sherlock stories, like like the Hound of the Baskervilles, and I forget what it's called. Oh yeah, A Study in Scarlet, which is renamed a Study in Pink in the first episode of the first season. Those stories are done in different, and to me, more exciting ways than the way that they're done in the original Sherlock stories.
Hmm. I'm not a Sherlock scholar, and I know you've mentioned
Yeah.
Baskervilles and Hounds, and I think there's somebody in the mixed martial arts group that I call the Hound of a Baskerville. But but yeah, the a lot of the older anime series did have, like, if it was a weekly series, like 24 episodes is normal to have per season.
Yeah.
And that's still kind of the case nowadays. There's some have these shorter half seasons that are like 13 episodes, but you'll rarely get anything lower than 13. It's always going to be 13, 24, and in some very rare cases, like a 54 episode season. But those aren't the norm. Um, but yeah, I know what you mean. Like, I know there are some of the Marvel seasons have suffered because they seem like they've had to stretch it out longer than it should have been. Like, I think they're all, what, 13 mainly episodes, 13 or more.
I
But
think
some of
so.
them do seem stretched out because of that. Um, because of that's how many episodes they had to order. And I don't
Yeah.
know if they fully write out the story and then order the episodes, or it's like kind of like a simultaneous process when they're doing both. But sometimes it suffers, sometimes it doesn't. It just really depends on how well they use those episodes.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like to me, if you're going to have the same number of episodes per season all the time for a particular show, it seems like that would be much more easy for it to feel contrived in general for any show than it would be if you just made however episodes organically feel like are appropriate for the story. But I can understand how that would be difficult to arrange from a marketing and production perspective.
Yeah, that's for sure. Like, the I think they just order per episode, and I guess depending on how many episodes, if you think about it, because Netflix is probably paying per episode. So sometimes for the person who's producing the content, it's good to make a lot of episodes, but sometimes it might hurt them in an artistic sense,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. Yeah.
So it's probably all about finding that happy medium, the thing that works great. The people get paid. They get maybe another season if they do really well. But yeah, it really is it's murky. So I can't really say there's like a perfect one size
Yeah.
fits all solution for
for every show. Like some do quite well with a low amount of episodes. Some do quite well with a high amount per season. So it really
Yeah.
depends on if they're dragging their feet or if they're keeping everything exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like in my opinion anyway. I mean, I guess mm, I like shows with fewer episodes generally speaking, but I mean, there are definitely a lot of shows, especially when I used to watch more shows, and there was, it seems anyway, like there was less of this tendency to have less episodes. There were lots of shows that I used to like a lot that had lots of episodes, but I can understand how like you were saying, creatively speaking, it's probably more difficult to develop content if you're doing more episodes.
Yeah, and that makes me think, like, because did you hear that Wheel of Time is going into production?
No, I didn't. That's awesome.
They announced it. I think they announced it last month that they're actually going to start going into production. And how many episodes do you think that's going to have?
Like 1,000? Like that's like it would be hard to do that justice unless you had like several seasons each with several episodes at least.
Well, you would think, right, that they're going to have a season for each book. But imagine on how difficult that would be, considering like the age of the actors, um, and like because the books happen in a 2 year span, 2 years. Like I
Oh, they
don't
do?
think, yeah, it's only
Wow, it
2 years.
felt longer than that to me, I guess.
So I don't know how they would be able to stick to that 2 year span and not and get young actors that don't age.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
If you're trying to cover 14 books, um, like I guess they did a decent job with Game of Thrones, but Bran aged a lot during. He's probably the one that visibly aged the most during the show.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I don't even know how they're going to do that. There's so many damn books.
Yeah, like and they're all like 700 to 1,000 pages each. So like I like with Game of Thrones, obviously all of those books are super fucking long too. Like some of them are longer than the Wheel of Time books, but there are only 5 books and there probably only will be 7 books total, I would guess. But obviously they're like, what are there, 14? I never remember. Are there 14 or 15 Wheel of Time books, including the prequel?
15, including the prequel.
Right. So that's literally twice as many books as Game of Thrones.
Yeah, pretty much. Um, well, we'll see. Hopefully, they do that justice. That's all I care about. Do
Yeah.
it justice, and I'm fine with it.
So what's it being done through this time? Like Amazon Prime, did you say, or is it something different?
Yeah, it's going to be through Amazon. I think has the rights to it,
Okay.
and they announced production. So who knows when this thing is gonna come out?
Right. Hmm.
But yeah, man.
Yeah. I hope that goes well. That would be fucking awesome if it's done well, but terrible if it's not done well.
Yeah, there's one anime we didn't talk about, and I didn't ask you to watch it because everybody has seen it, such as Akira. You've
Oh yeah.
probably seen it.
I think I mentioned to you that that's my favorite anime.
Yeah, I know we didn't bring it up because basically everybody's seen it, and
Yeah.
it's like the go-to when anyone talks about anime in the 80s, which is why we didn't cover it because it's been talked to death on the internet, talked about to death.
Oh, I must not be
Um,
aware of these nerd circles that you're a part of.
no, it's just Akira is kind of like the pinnacle. I also didn't bring up any any what you call it Miyazaki movies either.
Oh yeah, of course. And your favorite anime is a Miyazaki, isn't it? Princess Mononoke?
Yeah, that's like my top 10 movies. Is on my top 10 list, and this is all movies.
Cool.
So one of my top 10 movies is an anime movie.
Right.
But yeah, I just didn't. I wanted to talk about a little just more obscure things,
Okay.
like the movies we talked about today aren't super mainstream. They're a little bit more obscure than your Miyazaki's and your Akira's. Like, I didn't want to go straight into the obvious. I wanted to get a little bit more obscure than what people thought we were going to talk about. And I know, like, some people in the chat room wanted us to talk about some more contemporary stuff. I know someone mentioned Fist of the North Star, but I don't think you've seen that, right?
No, I haven't seen that one.
You want me
Yeah,
to?
yeah. Fist of the North Star is basically it's basically post-apocalyptic. Do you remember Kung Fu the series?
Yeah.
But think of that, except post-apocalyptic, and the main dude is like a super jacked Bruce Lee type who explodes people's heads when he touches them.
Oh, that sounds sweet. I should watch that.
It's like combining post-apocalyptic themes with martial arts themes.
Why does it seem like the post-apocalyptic theme is so popular in anime?
Um, I don't know. It's in the 80s, it was kind of popular at that time. So we're talking about what are the movies coming out. You had Mad Max trilogies. There were a lot of post-apocalyptic movies in the 80s, and I don't know why that is. Maybe it had to do with like the Cold War and people being scared of nuke to oblivion. So
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
there are probably a lot of movies about post-nuked Earth. So I think that's probably where a lot of those movies stem from in the 80s, and I think
Yeah.
there were some in the 70s as well. But
That made
there
me
are,
that made me think of Watchmen too, that we were talking about I think in the last no, the second last chat with Drew, because like a huge theme in that is the Cold War and at the end the motivation is to end the Cold War, right?
yeah, the whole motivation to Ozymandias's plot is to stop nuclear Armageddon, or at least to unite the Earth, to do um, e- to unite the two factions against one overall faction, to unite the Earth against something, to stop the squabbling, to stop people from nuking the planet, I guess.
Yeah.
Because if we think about the Watchmen, there's kind of like this countdown to when they're going to start nuking each other. And it was effective. It was an effective plan. It was a fucked up plan, but it was an effective plan. It worked. And I think even Captain or Doctor Manhattan agreed with it in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, like it's interesting because it's like it's a morally questionable plan, but in a way, like the movie makes it seem like it's morally questionable but necessary. And it's
Well,
interesting that they have the like you have to create a common enemy that can unite America and Russia again, that America and Russia can be united against in order to stop themselves from being their own enemies with each other and then destroying the planet with nuclear war.
yeah, I think if D. Canfield had a favorite character, it would have been Rorschach because he had a lot of conviction. He
Yeah,
had
that's
like
true.
so much conviction that he was willing to risk nuclear war because he thought it was morally wrong what they were
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah. He was definitely the most like morally rigid character, I would say.
Yeah, I think that would be Dee Canfield's favorite character.
Wouldn't surprise me. I like Rorschach. I like Rorschach a lot too because he's like a badass and he's so dark.
Yeah, he's also basically like an 80's style bigot.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, especially in the graphic novel, I think there's more of him being a bigot.
Yeah, there's a little, yeah, I would say more in the graphic novel, but he still definitely has it in the movie.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
They think they do talk about, well, in the graphic novel, Rorschach and the owl guy always get into arguments about politics, and usually Rorschach is like super conservative, like religious, and we're talking about super conservative, doesn't like gay people, et cetera, et
Yeah,
cetera.
wasn't
You
he
know, talk.
racist too?
I don't remember. Maybe I think he might have been. I just can't remember though. It's been a long time since I've read the book.
Was he in the movie though?
Um, I don't know. No, whoa, whoa, whoa. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't remember if he was racist in the movie either. I think he might have been against Asians, but like again, I
Oh,
don't
okay.
remember.
Yeah, I just the only thing I remember is like you said that he was homophobic and that he was really judgmental of criminals and like what he views as the underclass too.
Well, he liked to call people degenerates, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he and I'd say it's like if you were gonna give him a left or a right wing ideology, I guess we'd have to say right, because only right wingers use the word degenerate.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't know why they like that word so much. Degenerate. Like, what does that mean?
Well, you're not following all the right culturally conservative social practices.
Yeah, I think if he wrote The Watchmen 50 years from now and he wrote Rorschach like it was occurring in the 20 aughts, 20 aught tens, then Rorschach would be saying stuff like libtard and cuck. I'm pretty sure of that.
Yeah, probably.
So I think, yeah, I think Rorschach is supposed to be this very rigid, um, culturally conservative and bigoted character
Yeah.
that does not compromise at all in anything whatsoever.
Yeah.
And he's also probably the most mentally unstable character out of them all.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
you find
Like,
out, he's the guy that carries the End is Nigh posters, and he's just camping around. So
yeah.
he's basically a religious fundamentalist.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially like you see how mentally unstable he is, um, especially in the graphic novel, but in the movie too, when he's being given those Rorschach tests, and you see what he pictures in his head when he sees the images, and it's all violent and fucked up shit, and he says stuff like a pretty butterfly.
Yeah. So yeah, it's man, Frank Miller stuff is so awesome. But
Yeah,
that's aside from the point. I guess there's so much 80s anime out there. Luckily, a lot of those movies are on YouTube. You can watch, I think, pretty much all the stuff we mentioned is on YouTube. For some reason, I don't know what it is, but 80s anime doesn't seem to be taken down from YouTube very often. I don't know
That's
why
good.
that is. The newer stuff does, but I don't know why. 80s anime is just there and it's surviving. I know
Hmm.
you can watch a lot of it too on some of those other movie sites like Daily Motion will have it.
Oh, I've never heard of that one.
It's like a YouTube with lax or copyright um, issues. Like you could, I've seen a lot of stuff on Daily Motion that you can't watch on YouTube because they don't police enforce their copyright stuff as hard as YouTube does.
Oh, okay.
But
Hmm.
that's one to check out as well if you're interested.
Remind me, could you send me a message later to remind me about watching that one that you said is like Kung Fu?
Fist of the North Star?
Yeah, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I can certainly send you a link about that. I haven't seen the whole thing because it's pretty old. It's like in the early 80s.
Oh, okay.
Um, it's interesting. A kung fu dude in the post apocalypse. But yeah, I'll send you a link so that you could check it out. I think there's probably a bunch of um, episodes on uh, on the YouTube. I think it was playing on Netflix for a while. I don't think it is anymore though. And it might be on Amazon Prime. I'd have to check into that. But
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. Some of it is cheesy, but you'll see it and you'll be like, "Oh, this is interesting."
Hmm. Yeah, so well, this isn't an 80s anime, but I know you and I think we were talking recently about that newer Godzilla anime that I watched. And I watched the first one of those, and there's a trilogy, I guess, and they're all on Netflix. But I think those are pretty interesting. I think you haven't seen any of them yet, right?
No, but I did download one of them on your recommendation, so I have it here on my tablet. I was going to watch it at some point. I know before anything, though, I'm going to watch the documentary about the failed fire festival. But
Oh, I haven't
yeah, I
heard of
did
that.
the fire festival, like this big
Yeah,
scam. You didn't hear about that scam?
no.
Yeah, the fire festival's like this big festival that was a scam that they basically defrauded a bunch of people out of money.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a big deal when it happened, and there were some. I think Ja Rule was connected to it. It
Oh,
was like
okay.
so. There's a lot of weird stuff about it that's very sketchy. So
Hmm.
it's worth checking out if you want to. I wanted to see it because there was a lot of hubbub about it when it happened,
What's it
and
called?
the Fire Festival,
Oh, that's
F
the
Y
title.
R
Oh, okay.
E.
Oh, okay.
I don't know the title of the documentary, but that's what the documentary is about.
Okay. Okay.
And the fire is spelled Fyre.
Oh, okay.
All right. So I think we did a pretty good job of covering some really obscure anime.
Yeah.
Um, were there any, what were you reading? Uh, what have you been up to reading wise?
Oh, well, I guess recently I I finished reading this book just as a joke. One of Bill Maher's book called one of Bill Maher's books called The New Rules, which it was interesting, and like it would kind of followed along with my general opinion of Bill Maher that some of his jokes are really lame, and he's so ideologically opposed to Republicans. but occasionally I think his jokes are really funny, especially his more crude jokes. So yeah, that was fun.
So
And
this was a book you
yeah,
wrote?
yeah, it's basically just a book that's like a compilation of his on his the times on his HBO show where he says new rule, blah blah blah, something about politics, and it's usually a joke. So it's like basically a book full of his jokes.
Mm,
Yeah.
Well, everybody had their
Uh,
head up their ass.
he's so
what
arrogant
else did
too.
you?
The subtitle is how everyone but me, or no, a funny look at how everyone but me has their head up their ass.
Okay, well, I think he's probably being jokey about that statement.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
He does make fun. He is like he's really arrogant, and but he's aware, very aware of that too. Like he jokes around about how arrogant he is. So yeah,
oh, okay,
yeah.
all right,
I've
yeah,
also been I've been reading that book, a book called The Deceived, which is the second one in that series that I told you. I read the first one in, which is the Star Wars series, the Star Wars The Old Republic series, which I started reading because I didn't know those books existed, and they're based on those Star Wars The Knights of the Old Republic RPG video games that I liked playing when I was a teenager, and I remember you and I talked about that, and you liked those games too.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah. I remember we talked. You briefly mentioned before reading the first one of those books. Do you know how many books are in that series?
I'm pretty sure it's 3 or 4. I don't remember which, but it's definitely one of the two.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's
What did
so many
I?
different Star Wars book series.
Yes, there are.
Yeah,
It's weird because I'll go through my library list of available now, and there's always like a bunch of different
yeah.
Star Wars audiobooks on there.
There's a chart with a chronology of all the different book series at the start and the beginning of this book, and it's set and it goes along with the timeline, and it says that basically the first series starts off like 30,000 years before A New Hope, and then but that's still like 20,000 years before the Old Republic series. So there are like 3 prequel series over a very long period of time, and then some of them take place during the original Star Wars series, and then after and between all of the movies after that. It's insane.
Uh,
Yep.
yeah, they need to. I think it's in the movies. They just need to expand outside of into the Old Republic because they haven't even
Yeah,
touched the Old Republic in the movie.
yeah. If they did a movie on the Old Republic and it was done well, I think that would be awesome.
Yes. Let's see, what am I reading? Right now I'm reading The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich.
Oh yeah, I saw you post about that on the Mixed Mental Arts Facebook group.
Yeah, it's a ridiculously long book that goes into minute detail about everything Hitler and Third Reich related. So we have his early history, what he did to get power, how shitty of a military commander he was.
Yeah, like when he invaded Russia.
Yeah, exactly. What happens when you're a dictator and you don't know what the hell you're doing and you have this giant ego and don't care that you're just going to
Yeah.
make really stupid mistakes that end
Especially
up.
if you're really attached to your Nazi ideology to the point of arrogant delusion.
Yeah, so it's actually a good thing that completely seized the command of his military because that was the start of his downfall.
Yep.
Like none of the commanders that were involved in the Russia assault, they're like what the fuck is he wanting us to do here?
Oh,
Like,
I
are you
didn't know that.
serious?
That's interesting.
Like a lot of them were either demoted, some of them were put in prison because they didn't want to go through with the orders they were receiving.
Oh, wow.
They knew it was a foolish, um,
Yeah.
it was a foolhardy venture. They knew.
And Hitler, because he was a student of history too, if I remember correctly, or at least was a fan of history and learned about it a lot. He was aware of Napoleon failing to attack Russia in the winter too, so he knew that it was a bad idea already, which makes it even more dumb that he did that.
That, and they didn't have any reconnaissance. Like they didn't know how good the Russian tank was. They didn't know how many divisions they had. They didn't know how much of a meat grinder the Soviet military system is. That they'll just throw bodies and bodies and produce divisions out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting book. I'm actually right at the part where they talk about his idiocy when dealing with Soviet Russia. That's funny because Russia was always a little bit antagonistic to the Nazis because they were
Yeah.
very. They actually teamed up with the Nazis in the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. And then Hitler, that was another reason that was another huge mistake of Hitler, because if he had kept Russia on his side, who knows how the war might have ended
No,
up.
he wouldn't have been able to.
You
And
think
it's just
so?
egos, man. Because
Yeah.
Stalin was asking for stuff that Hitler wanted, control of specific Baltic states, like
Oh, okay.
asking, yeah, ask expansion into like Stalin wanted the Middle East. He wanted the Middle Eastern oil as well. So
Did
they
Hitler
weren't.
did Hitler want the Middle East?
Well, Hitler, the the reason for his expansion is because Germany didn't have much resources.
Was he focusing mainly on taking over Europe though?
Well, he was focusing on closer conquests like the Sudetenland and areas around Germany. After that, because the thing is he didn't get that far.
Yeah.
But he got to Poland is when everything sparked off, and Russia wanted Poland, and Hitler wanted Norway and Sweden and all those countries, and so did Russia. So already they're kind of like at odds in their own alliance.
Right. I don't remember. I know I've heard this before, but um how did Hitler ally with Russia in the first place?
Um, because one, Hitler didn't want to fight two fronts. Because you have the reason why they. Okay, so if you're going to World War One, right? They were enemies in World War One. Hitler was going to fight France for sure.
Right.
Like he thought that was something that was going to happen. Hitler did not want to fight another war on two fronts.
Right.
So Hitler's thinking was, okay, if I start fighting these guys on the Western Front, if I do not explicitly align myself with Russia, they are going to attack us.
Oh, okay. So it was actually a good strategic decision.
Yes, like they didn't want to be open to a weakness on one side, and plus they needed, I believe they got some resources from Russia as well, workers. Um, but yeah, it was to make sure that they weren't overextending themselves so that Russia would come in and try to do something. even
Okay.
though that ended up happening anyway. It wasn't that. Well, what happened was Russia was suspecting the Germans of fouling or not honoring their relationship. Because they have these things called secret protocols, which are pacts that they have with other countries that are in their own alliances. Like, for instance, like Hitler might have a secret protocol with Italy that if Russia did something specific, then Italy would help them fight Russia.
Okay.
So even
Yeah.
in their own, they had like all these measures within their own alliance to attack each other.
Okay. Yeah, Hitler was a big fan of Mussolini too, obviously, right? Which is, I'm sure, far from the only reason that he allied with Italy. I know I learned many of the other reasons before, but that's another thing that I sort of forgot the details about.
They were both
Well, many of the reasons he chose his allies as such is because all of his allies were heads of dictatorial regimes.
Yeah,
You know,
like I
they were all
remember,
anti-democracy.
yeah, yeah, like I remember hearing that Hitler modeled his Nazism after Mussolini's fascism, and it's strange because Nazism is sort of like a combination of fascism and communism in a way.
Well, Nazism, I think the only thing you really need to understand about Nazism is just the 25 points. Like if you go and look up the 25 points of National Socialism, that basically spells out what the Nazi Party that is. And you can always compare those points with fascism and what else, but they're not that dissimilar. There's definitely some very explicit things about race
Yeah,
in National Socialism that aren't really focused so much on in fascism.
yeah,
But yeah, there's certain little things that are very similar. Of course, they're both dictatorial regimes. So and there's that, but there's a lot of similarities between fascism and Nazism, or whatever you want to call
yeah,
it, National Socialism.
yeah,
Because Nazi is just a short German version of abbreviation of National Socialism,
yeah, yeah.
and their symbol is Hückenkreuz, which
What's
means
that?
the Hückenkreuz,
Oh, I didn't know that that's what the symbol's called.
swastika.
Oh, yeah. Is that what it
Yeah,
means?
so Hückenkreuz just means hooked cross in
Oh,
German.
oh, okay. Interesting.
That's the name of the symbol. Of
Okay.
course, well, the symbol has existed obviously before then,
Yeah.
but the Nazi version is actually called the Hakenkreuz, which is the Huck Cross.
Was it like did they 100% appropriate that, or did they make slight
They
changes
didn't make
to
it
it? I
up.
don't.
No, they didn't make it up.
I know they didn't make it up originally, but I just I don't remember whether they copied it and changed like one or two details here and there, or if they just totally 100% copied it.
From what I understand, they saw the symbol and they liked how
Okay.
it looked.
It's so funny that like people identify that symbol with Nazis now, and it's like you can't show that symbol in certain places because people will automatically assume that it means you're a Nazi, but that's really not the original meaning of it at all.
No, it's an ancient symbol, so it's been
Yeah,
around for a long time.
yeah,
And it means different things in different cultures that use that symbol. It's in the ancient Eastern cultures, even
yeah,
Mediterranean cultures as well.
yeah,
But,
yeah. That's what
but
I've
yeah,
heard.
it's a long, very detailed book. Um, I'm it's long. You get to see how much of a crazy person Hitler was.
So how long is the book?
1,600 pages.
Holy shit! Wow. Holy crap. I don't think I've ever even read a book that long. Like the longest one might be one of the Game of Thrones books, which was like 1400, I think.
Well, the audiobook is 57 hours.
Holy shit. Wow.
Well, the longest audiobook I ever listened to was 64 hours. That's Atlas Shrugged.
Oh yeah.
But
Well,
the guy read
yeah,
super slow. Is like, Jesus, why do you talk so slow?
yeah. And also like Atlas Shrugged in the physical book form, the papers are like the pages are like tissue paper thin, and the print is like so fucking small that you can barely read it. And it's still over 1,000 pages. So if it were if the pages were thicker and the font were bigger, it probably would be like, I don't know, maybe at least a few hundred pages longer.
Hmm. Yeah, possibly. Yeah, it's definitely a long book. The audiobook. Uh, it's some parts are very slow. It's mainly the slow parts are when there's not a lot of action. And what I mean by action is I swear there's like 3 hours of Hitler trying to negotiate certain things before the war starts.
Oh, okay.
It's like, oh, we got to negotiate this and that. And it's like, oh, Jesus, I just want to hear, the start of the war. And but that's how many details they go through. And a lot of the book, from what I understand, is based off of leaked Nazi documents or something like that.
Oh,
So you get
okay.
to see what the Nazis told people publicly and what they were saying, like behind the curtain, like
Oh, that sounds
obvious
interesting.
deceptions. Like you
Right.
get the funny thing about the book is you get to see the obvious deceptions that they were trying to ploy and whether they failed or not. And a lot of their deceptions worked, especially early on.
Yeah, definitely.
Like they lied
Well,
about so much. And they lied
and
to their own people too.
yeah, for sure. And I mean, well, in this book, does to you does it give merit to the argument that I've heard people make before, that which is that part of the reason that Hitler rose to power is that after the war reparations that Germany got after World War One, which if I remember correctly are like the equivalent of $1 billion in today's money with inflation or something. German citizens felt fucked over, so they were looking for like a strong, powerful leader to unite them as German people and say that they would fix all their problems or something like that.
Well, if you gotta imagine if the Germans were doubly fucked, and that was because one, they owed a lot of money, and then there was
Yeah,
the Great Depression.
exactly. Yeah,
So their monetary system basically collapsed. The
right.
German franc, I think it's Deutschmark or whatever the hell their damn monetary notes called. I think it started as four to the dollar and ended up being millions to the dollar.
Oh wow, shit.
Yeah, so like to buy a loaf of bread, you have to go to the store with a wheelbarrow full of money, like literally.
God damn.
And anybody that had savings, like those just got completely destroyed. So you have this complete financial collapse, this strife, and then you get a guy that says, "Oh, it's the Jews' fault. You know, they caused this."
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things. It's not just. It's always some disaster in combination with racism.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Like that's the hardest part because a lot of times when we've gone through the various financial collapses in the United States, um, we tend to enact more totalitarian things, but we tend not to go over the line so far as to cede government control to a dictator.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. As
But
much.
yeah, Hitler, it was chaos, man. In Germany, like the parties had their own private armies that they would send against their opponents. It was fucking crazy.
Yeah, man.
Like a lot of the money that the Nazi Party raised was used to fund private armies.
Yeah.
And you know, they're going up and they're not even in power yet. And they're going up to they're like minorities in their democratic Congress or whatever you want to call it in the Reichstag. And they're sending thugs to like other political gatherings to beat people up.
Wow. Yeah.
So it was chaotic, man. Like total chaos. And he rose out of that chaotic situation. Like if you have a society that's in complete chaos, it's very easy for a dictator to rise out of that.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And it's interesting, like Hitler as a person is interesting too, because like he was beaten by his father as a child, and his mother did nothing to stop it, and he ate his lunches alone at school, and and then and which obviously that doesn't mean you have to go on to commit mass genocide or something like that. Oh yeah, and obviously everyone knows he got rejected from art school too. So there were reasons that he felt like like he felt unjustifiably disconnected from society or something like that, or like the world was against him, and then he just blamed it all on Jews. And then apparently, like, does it say anything in that book about what I think I've seen this on a documentary or read it in a book or something about how Hitler was on lots of different drugs like crystal meth and I think bull semen for testosterone and coke or something like that too.
No, there's nothing like that. You know,
Okay.
according to this book, Hitler is like a straight arrow vegan type. He didn't drink
Oh
or
yeah, I
smoke.
forgot he's a vegan. That's funny. Yeah.
He didn't. So it's like I guess that's what he has, the no drinking and no smoking deal. Like he
Right.
had a very rigid um moral lifestyle in that way. I can't
Oh,
say
okay.
sexually, but at least with drugs, alcohol, and booze.
Well,
It says that he didn't.
it doesn't surprise me that he was puritanical.
Yeah, so um, I didn't see anything about him taking drugs.
Okay.
And I don't think I'll see that in this book. But in his early life, he grew up poor, and his parents died at a young age.
Yeah.
So he was off on his own
And he
for
had
well, he was like 18.
didn't he have like five siblings or something like that?
He had some siblings, but he also thought he was too good to do manual labor. So he was
Oh, okay.
even as a fucking poor dude with no parents who barely did he didn't even do well in school. He did pretty shitty in school. And he's like, "Oh, I'm not going to do any manual labor jobs." So he was kind of like a piece of shit, really, when he was young, and that he did actually come to his anti-Semitic views. Why he was this vagabond in Vienna. He was basically a vagabond until the World War One,
Oh, I
and
didn't know
even in
that.
World War One, he initially could not join because of some type of issue with his lungs. It was only
Oh,
after Germany was like losing the war and they needed to throw bodies in there that he was able to join.
okay.
So he was basically like a vagabond until he went in the army, fought in World War One. They lost. Of course, that loss very much shaped his political ideology from then on, and also with uh, with his Jew hatred, which is also something that was formed very early on. Funny thing about
Oh,
this
okay.
book too is like Hitler's always saying, quoting in the book that oh, America's run by Jews and Masons. It's like he reduces everything as are they Jews or are they not Jews?
Yeah.
And one of the things too I've thought, and some people don't realize this, is like, oh, Hitler hated communism. I think what Hitler hated most about communism is that Marx was a Jew.
I didn't even know that. That's funny.
So he doesn't like socialists, but I think he hates it more so because Marx was a Jew.
Right.
And
Yeah,
it's
that would make sense.
Jew, it's a Jew in his eyes, it's a Jewish ideology.
Right. That's funny.
So,
Yeah, it
but
seems
yeah,
like
he was afraid. He was trying to make sure America did not get into the war. He was trying to make sure certain people did not get into the war, and he failed.
oh, what was he doing to stop that?
Well, when Hitler was fighting with Britain, they made sure not to shoot down anything or even shoot anything that American. They didn't want to have any Americans killed
Okay.
because they knew America turned the tide in World War One. So if America was going to jump in, they're going to jump in with Britain, not with Nazi Germany.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting too that like at first, if I remember correctly, like even FDR um like didn't really have that much of a problem with Hitler personally and was part of the majority of people in general then who were anti-Semitic, and how like at first the America he and Americans in general really didn't want to enter into the war, and that they would, but that at first they started funding Britain and stuff and building ships and military supplies for them through the Lend-Lease Act, I think it was called. And then it was like Hitler getting crazy and shit like that, that at least partially that brought them into the war, I think.
Yeah, because early on, Hitler was doing fairly well. He was doing well. Dunkirk was mm, like he was able to do that. He was able to have people flee across. Back. He spent over a month bombing London. Like he was doing pretty well, but there were like some major blunders that occurred that stopped him. I think the biggest one was him going after Russia. That's what turned the tide. Is I think they lost 1 million men in that fight.
Yeah, fuck, man, that's a lot. Like, holy shit.
Yeah, because another thing that turned the tide too is I think when like Britain started bombing Berlin too when they were doing those air raids on London.
Right, yeah. Oh,
So
yeah. And like
So
the Dresden bombing is a popular, like you can see pictures of that online and how they bombed the shit out of that city.
yeah, so it's I don't know. His biggest blunder was definitely Russia, and that's what bit him in the ass and eventually led to his defeat.
Yeah.
But Russia was not a fully cooperative ally in the first place.
Did you see or listen to rather that Dan Carlin episode, that short one where he was talking about how the German military in World War One was superior to the German military in World War Two, and I think he was talking at 1.2 about how some people think that that Hitler rather was a brilliant military tactician, but in reality he made a lot of stupid fucking decisions, like for example invading Russia, like he said.
Well, the thing is about Hitler is his first hand at becoming a military tactician was Russia, because everybody in his military command thought his plan was absurd, and they were getting fired, resigned, and sent to the German Gestapo right and left. Like a lot prior to Russia, like the campaigns were ran by military people, not by Hitler. Like Hitler had aims and overall goals, but the military's job was to present those, like how to achieve those. And when Hitler wanted to go into Russia, the military brass was like, "What the fuck? This is not advisable."
Yeah. Yeah.
But he went for it anyway, and bam, he got what was coming to him, basically.
Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah. So that's that book. I would say it's a little bit of a slog. There, like the most interesting parts for me are like his rise in the National Socialist Party and the World War II stuff. The
Yeah.
stuff that wasn't too interesting to me was all like the diplomatic stuff that was going on before the war started. So it's
Okay.
all these like diplomatic lies, charades, and games and stuff like that. So that's the part that was a little. It's interesting that provided background, but it wasn't that exciting.
Okay.
Mhm.
Hmm. Yeah, sounds like an interesting book.
Yeah, pretty cool stuff. But yeah, I think we're good for today.
All right.
Um,
What were what was your favorite anime of those ones that we talked about, or was it one of the other ones that you recommended that I didn't watch?
uh, I would say the one that I watched the most was probably Thankfully. So I watched that a lot.
Okay.
That's because I actually taped it. But I think one of my favorites, just like the aesthetic, I really liked Iria, the sci-fi aesthetic that had. That was very different from what you would normally think of as a sci-fi movie.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So it had that really surprising aesthetic, kind of the underdog character, this weird, crazy alien that's like a biological weapon.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I would say Iria would be my favorite of those.
Okay. Cool.
What was yours? Yours is definitely Vampire Hunter D,
Yeah.
which was the oldest one on the list.
Yeah.
I think it's because you like stoicism. That's why you liked it so much.
Yeah, well, especially in like hero characters, that works really well. Well, especially since the way that that stoicism is seen in those sort of characters, it's kind of more of a cosmopolitan understanding than an actual like accurate philosophical understanding of stoicism in a way. It's like characters who seem like emotionless human beings or something like that. Well, but in the Stoic philosophy, it's more like mindfulness than just being an emotionless human being. It's more like experiencing your emotions, but then moving on with your fucking day and not being attached to something that happened to you earlier and to your emotional responses to it. But I do still like that sort of cosmopolitan understanding of stoicism in here in heroic characters in movies and stuff like that too.
One thing you have to remember too is he was also trying to evangelize the Stoicism. As if you remember early on in the movie, I don't know I forgot the name of the little boy, but he was crying because um, somebody died, right? Oh, he was crying because I think something happened. She got turned into a vampire. That's why she was crying because she got bit. And
Right.
then
Yeah, yeah. I think
Deed's like, "Oh, you have to stop crying and be strong and show your sister that you're strong or something like that." So he was definitely evangelizing his stoicism onto the little boy there.
yeah, you have to be strong.
And he didn't do it because he's an asshole. He's really trying to help the boy out, get over his feelings and to be strong like him.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like that obviously was pretty beneficial for the types of situations that they were navigating. Uh-oh.
Lost him.
Uh, Sorry about that.
You get kicked out?
Yeah, the usual.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't. I'd probably lost the last minute, so I don't know what you said.
Oh, I was just saying that um that sort of that conception of that sort of stoic mindset, just like being strong, was it was very useful for Dee to teach that to the kid for the types of challenges that they had to navigate.
Oh, yeah, he's passing on his stoic knowledge
Yeah.
to the masses.
Yep.
But yeah, I think the only time you hear him scream is when he dies. That's
Yeah.
like the most emotion you hear out of him when he gets stabbed in the chest.
Yep. Yeah. It's so interesting too after um after he basically dies, how his hand that has like supernatural powers or something sort of like brings him back to life or wakes him up as if he were just sleeping or something like that. That was interesting.
Yeah, I was reading the Wikipedia on Vampire Hunter D, and there's definitely like more to the story than what's in the movie. So, like for instance, the hand is like a symbiote. It's a symbiotic relationship.
Right.
I don't know like the exact details, but in the article I read, it says that um, the hand can revive D by imbibing specific elements. I guess that's why you see him eating dirt.
Oh, okay.
The
Right.
hell is
I
he
thought that
doing?
was
Just
a
eating
little.
dirt?
Yeah, I thought that was kind of confusing when I saw it. I'm like, what the hell? What is going on?
Yeah, that's part of one of his powers. They don't really explain that well in the movie. You just see him eating some dirt and then sucking in some air,
Yeah.
and then he starts beating on him, and then he rises up and stabs the monster, the
Is
cloud
there?
monster that turns into little chunks of flesh.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. How is in the you said it's originally based on comics?
Yeah, it's originally based on, I don't know if it's a comic book series or just a plain novel, but it's
Okay.
definitely based off of some other thing.
In that one, in that does it explain something about how um these vampire powers are linked to his symbiotic relationship with his hand that's like sentient and has magic powers or something? Because I was just thinking about that in terms of like closer to the beginning of the movie when his hand is talking to him and he's about to face off with the demons when they first come to attack them, and he's saying he warns the hand like shut up or I'll get rid of you or something like that.
I don't know, like, but I just pulled up the Wikipedia article, and it's definitely based off of novels.
Okay.
And there have been 26 novels
Oh wow.
published.
Wow.
So its early incarnation is from a novel, from Japanese novels.
Okay. Not
So they
graphic
have
novels,
a bunch
just like
of
print novels.
just regular print novels,
Okay.
and then they made graphic novels based off of some of those print novels.
Oh, okay. Oh, I wonder, those might be interesting to read.
Yeah, so they call it a far future post-nuclear Earth that
Oh,
combines
okay.
elements of pulp genres, Western, science fiction, horror, and fantasy.
Yeah, it does seem kind of Western sometimes, hey?
Well,
Iria kind
the
of does too
horses.
at times. Sorry?
Yeah, I think of the horses, right? The mechanical horses, and
Yeah,
kind of they have a saloon scene
yeah.
in the movie. So I definitely see that aspect and kind of homesteading with herding with the sheep and stuff like that. So yeah, I definitely see that Western aspect in there. But yeah, it's definitely a genre mashup of different things.
It seems like at least all of the ones that I watched are sort of like that, like a mashup of different themes. Like it seems like that's often the case when I watch anime, or at least anime of this type.
Yeah, so I'm trying to check some other stuff here. But yeah, I know they allude to his ancestor being Dracula at the end.
Right.
But I know there's another more recent movie called Vampire Hunter Deep Bloodlust.
Oh yeah.
I remember watching it, but I don't remember it being as good as the original.
Oh,
It's
okay.
visually better, but the original movie is just kind of one of those milestones that you just can't ignore.
Does the sequel have the same characters?
Well, I know the sequel definitely has D. I don't remember if the other two characters make a reprisal or not,
Okay.
but I think that's also available on YouTube.
Okay. Is it worth watching?
I don't know. It's been a long time since I've seen it, so I don't know
Okay.
if I can actually recommend it or not.
Okay.
If you like Vampire Hunter D, then you'd probably like it. If
Okay.
you want to, and you said you liked that of the four that you watched. So if you
Yeah.
like D, you'd probably like the sequel. I think there's actually more action in the sequel.
Oh, okay. There's a lot in the original, so that sounds awesome.
Yeah, you might like it. It's worth checking out if you're a fan of the original.
Okay.
All right.
So, um, sorry, I was just wondering, out of those other ones that you recommended to me that I didn't watch, which one of those are your favorites? I'll probably watch all of them eventually, but what do you think?
Man, I like a lot of those other ones that I sent you. I would say, what would I recommend for you to start with? I would have to go and look at that list. It was pretty long. Remember, I mentioned some other ones like Venus Wars. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That, um, oh, Demon City Shinjuku. Oh man. Okay, out of all of those, I'd say Demon City Shinjuku is pretty good, and so is Kashan Robot Hunter. Man, it's hard for me to say. They're all good. If
Okay.
I were to pick one of those on the remaining on the list, hmm, that's a really hard decision, man.
Okay.
I'd say I think I put them in the order that I like them anyway. So after Lily Cat was Demon City Shinjuku, I'd say that's a good one if you're wanting to
Okay.
check out some more. But yeah, man,
Cool.
I guess we'll go ahead and wrap stuff up. You got any plugs for me today?
Yeah, if people want to, they can check out my YouTube channel at Mindgasms, and I do lots of videos about ideas and read my novel chapters on there, and do podcasts with lots of interesting people, mostly from mixed mental arts, like Dusty. I think we're going to talk tomorrow too, right?
Yeah, that's
Um,
right.
and yeah, and also, if people want to, they can check out my blog at mindgasms.theblogpress.com, where I write about ideas. I think my most recent one was about Operation Downfall, which was an invasion plan that was in place for World War II. If the invasion on Japan had continued after the bombs had been dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which included 7 more atomic bombs being used. And I also publish my novel chapters and sometimes short stories and poems on there. And then also, if people want to give me money on Patreon, that would also be awesome. That's at Mindgasms. And I'm also on the social medias, the Facebook Ibuha and the Twitter. And it's at Andrew Meitzer. My last name is spelled Meintzer. It's that weird German spelling. And that's pretty much it.
All right, great. Well, please check out our Facebook group. We did get an update from Mr. Hunter Motts.
Yeah, a few.
Some exciting stuff to come. Said there should be some podcasts going in the future that they were doing. They're on hiatus because Brian was shooting the schooled show, and now they're gathering and trying to see what guests we're going to have on in the future. So, yeah, if you like mixed middle arts, we're going to start doing the podcast again. I'll let you know when that happens. And check out our Patreon page. And thank you all Patreons for supporting the show. Really love you guys, and thank you for doing that and helping us out that way. Uh, but yeah, keep us in your minds when we come in and we're going to drop some shows in probably the near future.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you guys for watching. Next week, I may not have a show because it's my daughter's birthday, so I'm not going to be available that weekend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm not going to be available for doing any shows. But the weekend after that, we're doing the new Jim Crow, and I'm really, really looking forward to that.
Oh, I must have got my weeks mixed up. I thought the new Jim Crow was next week.
It was. I had to change it because of my daughter's birthday. I completely forgot.
Okay.
You're right, man. You were right. I did
Okay.
change it though.
Okay.
All right, so it's not going to be next week. It's the week after that. I did push it back because I will not be available next week.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Please berate Drew about his sciatica. Tell him to get his ass in check
Yep.
so that he'll be able to come to the. I don't think he's going to come to the new Jim Crow. I think that's too liberal for him. I think Isaiah is. He's very much a big fan of that book. And
Yeah,
it's
didn't you
actually
say
one of the reasons.
sorry.
Yeah. One of the reasons why I read this is from listening to a podcast that he and what's his name? Come to the Table podcast.
Right. Yeah, I know the podcast you're
Is
talking
his name
about.
Sean? No, is it Sean?
I forget what the guy's name is. But yeah, that's what I
I
was
think
just thinking about that I was gonna mention, yeah.
Yeah, so there's this podcast called Come to the Table. Isaiah was on it, and they talked about the new Jim Crow, and they had a really fascinating conversation. So I was like, huh, what's this new Jim Crow stuff all about? So I went ahead and read it, and I thought it was just going to be a bunch of SJW nonsense, but that's not what it was at all. There was a little bit of it in there, but it was very small amount.
Mhm.
That did not put me off to like the greater idea of that book because there was a lot of
Yeah.
data actually in
Yeah.
this book
Yeah.
and that was surprising about how crazy some of that data was. So yeah, it's that's why that's why I decided to read it, and then after I read it, I was like, oh shit, really got to talk about this book
Yeah.
because I know we've talked about, or at least Mixed Metal Arts has promoted some of the ideas of Thomas Sowell,
Mm-hmm.
and and the thing is if we're looking at the black struggle, there's more than just Thomas Sowell's view of that. There's other views that do have data and have very valid reasons and valid um, causes for these struggling communities. And from what I've read so far, it seems like the number one biggest thing that is causing so much damage in the black community does revolve around the drug war.
Exactly.
The drug war is 100% statistically and verifiable, and the effects of it are verifiable. It's very hard to find data about racism.
Yeah.
At least if you're using this angle, you'll have hard data to promote um, this idea in order to fix something. Like it's very hard to apply a fix something as nebulous as racism.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, we'll talk about it for sure. But the name of the podcast is Come to the Table. You can check it out at cometothetablepodcast.com, where they talk about, he talks about with Isaiah, that book. And I probably will be listening to that podcast again in the near future just to pump me up a little bit.
I should do that too.
As I actually, like, when I think I've read an important book, from the library, I'll purchase it. So I read the ebook of the new Jim Crow and I ended up buying a hard copy of it.
Oh, okay. I
I didn't
listened
buy a
to the audiobook.
hardcover copy. I was like, this is an important book. I'm gonna make sure I have this in my library.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah, by the way, the name of the guy is Sean McCoy.
Oh, right, yeah,
That's Sean McCoy Come to the Table podcast.
right. Wasn't he interviewed on Hayden Bruce's podcast too? I think he was, right?
Maybe he may have been, but he's one of those cool guys who likes to mix mental arts with, his Christian arts and atheist arts, and tries to talk to people that are not as similar as he is. Tries to reach out.
Yeah.
But anyway, we went off super tangent. Thank you, everybody, for watching the show. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Or if you want to watch tomorrow, Andrew will be having another politics podcast. And I think we're talking about political things, but
Yeah.
we'll see. Check it out. Check that out tomorrow at his YouTube page.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Good night.
Adios.